Odd. To look forward to labor in the hot sun, Kaladin hoped for something else. Hoped. Yes, he discovered that he could still hope. A spear in his hand, an enemy to fight. He could live like that.
Welcome to The Storming Journey, a sacred text reading of The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. This podcast may contain spoilers for the Stormlight Archive through Wind and Truth.
All right, everyone, welcome to episode 8, where we're covering Way of Kings, chapter 6. I'm Adam, and I'll be the Ardent for this episode.
I'm Liz. I'll be your Worldsinger today.
And I'm Elle, and I'm today's Veristitalian.
Okay, so my world singing for today is a little bit on the nose, so I hope you will all forgive me. I have never been an athletic person. Like, I have always hated being outside, doing sports, running, sweating. None of this is things that I enjoy. But as an adult, I realized, hey, I need some kind of exercise. It's good for me physically. It's also good for me mentally. You need some form of exercise. So I took up running with my husband. He is a marathon runner, and I decided, okay, I'm going to figure out how to do this. I'm only half crazy, so I only run half marathons, also because I'm slow, so slow. So we lived in Seattle for 12 years, and it is not the funnest place to do long-distance running because for 10 months of the year, it rains every day. And I am remembering a specific time in my training when I had set for myself I needed to run 12 miles this Saturday morning, and it was absolutely pouring rain outside, and I was just not excited about doing this, about being out there for 2 hours, 3 hours in the soaking rain. And I said, okay, how am I going to motivate myself? And I scrolled through the things on my phone, on my Audible, and was like, okay, what am I going to listen to? I need something that's like really going to motivate me. And I landed on Andy Weir's The Martian, because the only thing worse than running 12 miles in the rain is being abandoned on Mars by yourself. So I was able to do that running because listening to what was happening to Mark Watney on Mars made me feel not so bad for myself. And ever since then, that has been my this running day sucks and I'm going to make myself do it anyway go-to book. So there you go.
I mean, I think you might have a new, you could just do this chapter. Like, your running's bad, no, Kaladin's running is worse.
I have pulled that with my my Stormlight fan teenager, been like, it's like Kaladin, he didn't stop running, you're not going to stop running, let's go. He does not
How many
agree.
times, Liz, have you listened to The Martian now, if it's your go-to?
I don't know, a lot. Not as much as the Brandon books, but a lot.
I have our Storm's Eye View today. And I think I have decided that my thing is 10-word sentences because I love structure. I think it forces me to be creative in ways that make it easier to write. So that is my structure. I'm going to call it something, maybe like a heraldic or something like that. Because it's not a ketic, but it is 10 words for each of the heralds and 10 sentences. So it's like you could put it in a square, block, a grid. It'll catch on. It'll be real big. Kaladin finally arrives at the Shattered Plains with some hope. A light-eyed woman will determine his fate. He could fight. Instead, Tvokov repays past bitterness by lying about Kaladin's desertion. To the bridge cruise Kaladin goes, immediately drawing Gaz's ire. Vestless, with unshod feet, Kaladin runs and pushes and runs. Hours lifting and bleeding and labored breathing become earthly damnation. Parshendi arrows take down all but Kaladin, who survives again. Collapsed in exhaustion, he wakes only to Syl's energy shock. He wasn't meant to survive, yet he gets back up. Back to running, lifting, pushing, breathing, surviving, over and over.
Over and over and over and over and over.
Do we need a mini Mormon moment at the beginning of this? That's just the quick insertion of Pioneer Children sing as they walked and walked and walked and walked and walked and
We
walked.
could do the Stormlight version.
Kaladin storm blessed,
Carried up bread.
cried as he ran and ran and ran and ran and ran. There you go.
Anyway, so today's theme is circumstance. This is a hard chapter. It's a very difficult chapter to come up with a theme that you're trying to read in a sacred way when it's just a chapter of just terrible things happening to someone who's already in a terrible situation. Elle's Storm's Eye View was like excellent and like invigorating the chapter, but I do think it's just a chapter where it's like Kaladin gets a little bit of hope and then he gets dashed and then he just starts running and then running and running and running and running and running. And so I chose circumstance because I was thinking how in our last conversations about Kaladin, we kept talking over like, you know, the different not opportunity, because that's previous episode on Shallan, but like the different ways that he's engaging with the multiple people that he's been across time, right? He's been a healer, he's been a big brother, he's been a son, he's been a big warrior, then he's been a slave, and now he's a bridge runner. And each of those are a circumstance that he lives in. So I decided on this word circumstance rather than circumstances to think of like how sometimes we claim to be like a victim of circumstance. So we are, you know, bound by what's happening around us. We are at the behest of what's occurring to us, and we have no agency in that way. So we read ourselves in as a victim of our circumstance. But I also want to think of circumstance as somewhat similar to last episode as an opportunity, but also just how we respond to circumstance, how Kaladin responds in many ways. And then even more than victim and response, I want to think of circumstance as event as well. Here pulling on the idea of event being a big moment, but also a big moment that is like historically contextual, while also being something that is a moment that moves us towards something different. And I don't know where we're going to go today with that, but that's where I want to start us off with. Liz L., where do you want to take us for this ride? For our own circumstance, shall we say?
I am not quite sure if it specifically relates to circumstance. I think it can, but what I am thinking about is the contrast in descriptions from Kaladin versus Shallan. Like, every time I go back to a Kaladin chapter after I've read a Shallan chapter, I'm just blown away by how descriptive Kaladin is. And maybe it's like a little bit about like change in situation. Like, I don't know, we can kind of imagine caves, but like Rosharan world building is a little bit different where Kaladin's outside. But Kaladin is so descriptive in his surroundings, his like what is going on, that it's like I would have expected that from Shallan. Whereas with Kaladin, like we're getting all of this like extra context and extra like, I guess, beauty to the world that he is identifying that I just did not expect from Kaladin. And that is like really showing through in at least my personal reread of this.
One of the things I got out of reading this through the lens of circumstance was how quickly human beings adapt to any circumstance. We get used to things so quickly, and we just start doing the same things that humans usually do. So, for example, like when Kaladin first starts running the bridge, he already is thinking about kind of the like social hierarchy that might exist within the bridge crews, right? They're the lowest of the low. No one cares about them. This is an absolute travesty. But he's thinking, the men at the edges had better views. He suspected those spots were more coveted. So even within the bridgemen, there's still this jockeying for rank in spite of like that they are the lowest of the low. And we get kind of similar things. Just also how Kaladin is very shaped by the circumstance to become someone who can run, even though he's exhausted every time he continues, right? He quickly he's unable to not adapt to that. And just how resilient human beings are to adapt to horrific things happening.
I have thoughts on both of your things. They're like separate thoughts. But your first one was like how quickly people adapt to their circumstance. Made me think, we're in the middle of trying to sell our house and we are currently renting. So we are paying for 2 houses worth of rent and utilities. And it's a nightmare. And this has been like 4 months of this, 5 months of this. I kind of lost track. And I had an appointment with someone, and they were like, how are you not more stressed about your house? And I was like, I don't know. I've kind of just now assumed that I am going to have to pay double rent for like ever. Like, it's just easier to like adapt and assume that this will always be the case than it is to like be continually stressing out about this. So that was my thought on we adapt. And I'm like, oh yeah, I did just do this. This is what is going on with my life. And then the other one you're talking about, Kaladin, just like, he just keeps running and he keeps doing it and keeps existing. Felt very resonant with my experience with depression and like chronic fatigue stuff of just like, it didn't feel like I could just stop and like take a break. At the time when this all started, I was in a full-time job and supporting my husband through the last year of college. And so like he couldn't work. And so I had to provide for our family. And despite all of this and trying to figure out medications and whatever, like I had to just keep going. And I'm still not really sure how I made it through that year, how I've made it through the last like 9 years, but somehow I have done it. And I don't know, it kind of actually feels like nice to like think about the fact that I have done that. Like just existing through that is an accomplishment. Like I am so proud of Kaladin for like having made it through this run that was so exhaustingly hard and still pushing through it. And like, you know, maybe I should be proud of myself for also even just getting through that.
I definitely think you should be proud of yourself. I'm proud of you for getting through that.
Well, thank you.
So with circumstance, do we see it as well when we think about the other people in this chapter? Because Kaladin chapters always center on Kaladin in many ways. I feel like the Shallan chapters up to now have very much brought in, like, you have, I'm now forgetting his name.
Yalb.
Right? You have Yasna, you have Taravangi, and they're very populated, right? And here in the Kaladin chapters, we have Kaladin doing some things. There's the random bridge man who's on the run with him, and then that is a random bridge man, right? It's not.
Yeah, he ends up dying in that first run.
So like it's a random bridge man. It's Gaz who becomes a villain down the road. It's the bright lady who assesses Kaladin, but that's about it, right? It's not very populated. And so I'm wondering if we think about the chapter in relation to like the circumstances of others around him, if anything comes out in our thinking, or just like the circumstance of the Shattered Plains themselves as being a set of circumstance, just in this tension that's all like playing out, and we don't see it yet, but Kaladin's clearly feeling the effect of it, right? And so like the ripple effects of circumstance when you have power and authority. Is there anything y'all have to say to that?
I'm thinking just how quickly that the Alethi have become used to the eternal war that's going on here, right? Which is something that Dalinar spends a lot of time fighting against in the first 2 books, right? The fact that like, oh, we're just going to be at war and this is normal, and like we're not going to really work to change it. We're so used to being at war. And sure, a lot of bridgemen are dying, but like, who cares? They're bridgemen, so we're not going to worry about it. We're just going to continue in the same circumstance because we're used to it.
Back into like the conversation about adaptability, right? Where it's like we can adapt very easily to our circumstances, but then we sometimes forget about those circumstances, right? And you can see that in like broader aspects of living, right? You become used to certain things happening in the world. You become used to the way you treat other people, and it takes so much time to get out of that circumstance that you're in.
The group of people that stood out to me in this reading was the listeners and the singers and the listeners, I guess, because I guess they're all technically Parshendi, but I feel like I should use their actual name for them. And some of them are the listeners on the Shattered Plains with the ones who are fighting back, and then you have the singers who are enslaved, and Kaladin notices them, but doesn't really stop to consider them beyond, it's weird that they are here, but we're fighting their cousins, ? And I think I just felt for the listeners and the singers, the enslaved singers especially, because even though Kaladin is in this awful situation, it feels like the singers are, I don't know if I would say even worse off, but they're also in an incredibly awful situation where they're forced to have their minds essentially clouded by the whole Ba'edo Mishram situation. And then to be used and not treated as beings. And even it feels like Kaladin could be more aware of them, but because of his circumstance, he's not able to be aware of other people's circumstance. And I think that is something that we can also end up dealing with in our life, is we're so focused on our circumstance that we don't look at people who may have similar circumstance to us.
What highlights that a lot is when Kaladin gets to the Shattered Plain, he looks over all the people. He does see the Parshmen and he wonders why they're there. But then he just he doesn't dive into that thought, right? He's just oh, I guess these Parshmen are fine with us fighting their brothers on the Shattered Plains. There's just one small little line where he assesses them briefly. But again, he's just, it's normalized. It's this thing that he's so familiar with that it doesn't shake him out of that circumstance. He's just oh, yeah, this is normal. So let's keep going. And I think that that's such a poignant reading of circumstance itself, is that stagnation that it can get us into, that the fact that we don't wake up to the things around us that are really negative and bad. I think this leads us perfectly into our sacred reading, because I want us to apply today again the first oath reading, but I want us to control it a little bit from the 3 different oaths, just to do Journey Before Destination, to think about that with the chapter. So again, with our sacred reading of the first oath method, we're reading the chapter and thinking about it and talking about it and discussing it through the different lines of the first oath to become a Knights Radiant. So life before death, journey before destination, and strength before weakness. And here I want us to focus on journey before destination, because this is a moment where Kaladin has arrived somewhere. He's got to the destination, but he's definitely still in the journey. And so I want us to think about how do we read journey before destination in this chapter? Specifically, how do we think about it in relation to Kaladin, to Syl, to Gaz, to the bridge itself, and then to Bridge 4 as well. And we can pull in others as well, but I just want to kind of think through the different factors in this chapter in relation to this idea of journey before destination.
The one that really stands out to me that I kind of want to spend some time on is with Gaz, because he is instantly a villain in this chapter. And then by the end of the arc, he's part of Shallan's crew, the Unseelie Court. Kaladin still has very mixed feelings towards Gaz, and Gaz also has very mixed feelings towards Bridge 4 by the end of the book. But I think that his journey from the manager of a bridge crew to deserter to Lightweaver is really fascinating. and like helps to give like some insight into the villains in our own life, so to speak, to like humanize those people as they're not static. They can be the villain in the circumstance of your life, but end up finding a way to become a different person. Or even if that doesn't mean resolving the like villain factor of their earlier time, like they can still become a better person in the future.
Yeah, the thing that really stuck out to me is when Kaladin sees Gaz for the first time. And when we meet someone new, we're essentially treating them as the destination. They are the person who has arrived at this point. We don't know anything about where they've come from, but Kaladin reads a lot into the way Gaz looks, right? He talks about his face is so scarred that his beard grows in patches. And he's missing an eye, but he doesn't cover up his eye socket with an eye patch. And that he's got the sergeant's shoulder knots, and he has a way of walking that shows he's been in lots of battles. So there's a hint that Kaladin is reading that Gaz has been on some kind of journey, but Kaladin doesn't know that yet, and so can only treat him as this person who's at the destination. And as we find out more about where Gaz has been on his journey, and as we experience some of his journey with him, that's when he becomes more sympathetic. It's much harder to treat someone as a villain when we've seen their journey.
I really liked that idea of meeting someone is a destination. And thinking what it would mean to meet someone as if it was a journey. And I think some of that is going into your interactions without preconceived expectations, or not being willing to lightly grasp those expectations rather than firmly holding on to them. But I really like that way of thinking about it, and I think that's going to like stick with me.
That comes out so well in Syl. Like, I think everyone she meets is not a destination. Everyone she meets is a journey. Especially thinking about the moment right near the end where she's like, do I have a name? I do. Sylphrena. Oh, wait. Syl, I have a nickname, actually, y'all. I'm turning her Southern in that moment. But
I could get up behind Syl the Southern Belle. It would be awesome.
But I think Syl does that, right? Like, everyone Syl meets, she's just curious and interested. And so she kind of like embodies that journey before destination and the relationship she creates. Yes, there's a moment where like, I'm thinking when she like hisses and doesn't like a pattern, right? Like maybe there's that part, or not liking Odium. Like that's not quite into that. But I think in general, the people she's meet, she's just curious about them. She hasn't met them, and now they're like, that destination of like, now I can get to this point B now that I've gotten to point A. Just as like Kaladin gets to Gaz, now he has been assigned here, and that's like the destination part of it. I would think Syl is kind of that embodiment of that journey meeting in many ways.
Another interesting point of journey, I think, is Kaladin's relationship with his past self in this chapter. Because there's at least 2 points in the chapter where we see this return to his medical training, right? And I'm really thinking about the one that's where he says that training, it belonged to another man from another time, almost from the shadow days, like so long ago in his journey. But while Kaladin might not be him any longer, he could still heed him. So like this ability to conceptualize your past self as another person who can help you. This is like a way of thinking that I found very helpful in my life, to think of my past self, my present self, and my future self as like 3 selves. I tell my students a lot of the time, be nice to your future self, like actually block out time to do this so you don't make your future self miserable. But also I like this advice to like listen to our past self when we were maybe in different circumstance than we are now. And being able to listen to that person who we may not be anymore, but who may be able to help us through what we're doing now.
So I marked that line in relation to, I was debating on using that line as our opening quote for the episode versus the line about him wanting to have a spear in his hands again. Because there is that tension in this chapter between him. Does he fall back onto his medical training? Does he fall back onto his soldier training in this journey that he's taking, right? And it feels like in many ways, because he's done such a mind separation from his medical training, that's why it becomes a him, right? I'm not going to be him, but I can heed him. But the spear training is so close that he has to like rely on that in order to then be okay with running this bridge, right? It's that training that kind of becomes him in many ways as he's trying to get through the journey part of this chapter.
I'm curious what you were like thinking about with the bridge. Like you were like, what is the journey the bridge is going on?
I thought it was really fun because like the chapter opens up with him looking out and he sees everyone cutting down the bridge is being built. It's like such a smallest part where he sees it cross. He's like, oh, I'm going to go do some woodworking. This is going to be fine. I can chop down some trees. And it's like, nope, you're actually going to be, carrying these big bridges. And so it doesn't come out, I don't think, naturally from Brandon's writing, the bridge as a character. But it's just something I want to think about going forward in this, especially because thinking about the bridge's ultimate end result, right? To be a middle part of the big flying ship, right? That like the bridge 4 as the ship versus the bridge 4 as that. And so I just wanted to perhaps pull that in as like, this is the starting of bridge 4 as in that bridge that saved their lives.
Okay. This is making me think there is a book, and I cannot remember the title, so I'll have to put it in the show notes, that my family owns that is about the cross, and it's the story of the wood and the tree that was used to build the cross for Christ.
It's the tale of the 3 trees, I bet.
There you go. And like one becomes a ship and one becomes
one becomes the manger, one becomes the ship where he calms the storm, and one becomes the cross.
There, that's what.
And they're all disappointed in what they've been made into because they have other. Anyway, it's a great Christian metaphor book. It's in my Christmas books.
It's in our Easter books, I think. At my parents' house. But I was thinking about that when you were talking about like the origins of the wood, and I was like, oh my gosh, we do that. Like we actually do talk about that, where we have metaphorized the wood of Christ's life and how like that would have gone on a journey and the expectations it had. And now I'm thinking about like, oh, maybe the wood for this bridge thought it was going to be a wagon to help carry supplies. And maybe its brother one became the slave cart Kaladin rode in. And then another one became the wood for the bridge.
Right, that fan fiction.
The wood for the bridge that Kaladin ran. And then we need a third one because everything comes in threes. But, I do like that. That is like, I'm back on the train. I don't know that I was off it. I just now I'm fully on board.
There's even longer like Christian history around the cross and like the pieces of the cross being used in various relics, right? And like also like appearing in places and being held in places where it's not really the cross's wood, because unless it's magic wood, which it is magic wood, let's believe it. But like I just think about this bridge as like something that we forget, not as a character, but just as a part of it all, right? It's something that like gets imbued with magic powers, for one thing, right? He uses it as a way to suck all the arrows into it. It's used to allow soldiers to cross it to kill people, right? It's used to carry the sick and wounded back to the place. It's used almost as their escape route, but then not used as that. And so I just think it's something that I want to think about and kind of focus on in the reading going forward. Of what is the bridge's journey, not destination? What's the bridge's journey in this?
I really like that. I didn't think I was going to like enjoy this interpretation of it so much, but
we'll keep an eye on it. I think it's a perfect time then to move into our Wisdom of the Heralds. The Wisdom of the Herald sections where we talk about what we're taking away from this episode and away from this conversation. So does anyone want to start us out?
Thinking about the bridge itself and the journey that objects go through and the circumstances that give things meaning makes me think about the different things that I own that I've inherited from various people and the journey that those things have gone through, and makes me want to appreciate those things more. My grandmother passed away, I don't know, what is it now, 4 years ago. And I inherited a lot of little trinkets from her house as they were, liquidating the house and getting ready to sell things. And none of them are particularly valuable, and none of them are particularly my style either. They're just all things that I have stuck in this cabinet in our entryway because I didn't have another place for them. But thinking about this has made me want to get those out and pay a little more attention to, I guess, the things and the journey where these things have come from, and appreciate that a little more.
I think for me, the biggest thing from our conversation is the meeting people as journey rather than destination, and just like, what does that mean? Because I don't think we've figured what it means. Like, Still's a good example, maybe, but I think that's hopefully a conversation that'll continue forward as we talk more about the book itself and things, right? Like, what does that journey part of coming across people, how does like keeping that forefront of your mind where it's always a journey, it's never a destination until you get to that final destination, right? And so I think that's what I'm going to be thinking about and considering.
So my current position as of the recording of this is working for a museum and thinking about the way that representing stories through artifacts and how some of these artifacts are things that they are representative of a bigger journey than we maybe think about them. There's like the short-term journey of this person brought this item with them because it was so important. Or there's the journey of what that item was used for. And so I really like, Liz, your idea of thinking about what artifacts are in your life and like what stories they are with them. So as a side thing, my like personal thought on it is, if you know anything about these artifacts, or if you know someone who knows something about these artifacts, finding a way to record any of the stories that you know about them, because I got an artifact from someone at some point, but I didn't have any story with it. There was no context for why this item was important and why they gave it to me. And so it wasn't actually an artifact to me or like meaningful because I had no idea what its journey was. And that was a little frustrating because it could have been meaningful, but I wasn't given context, and I have no way to get context now because the people have passed on. So I think like part of what I'm feeling called to do is to treat my job seriously. Like, not that I wasn't, but to really focus on what stories am I trying to tell with these artifacts, and are they stories that wouldn't have gotten told? Or are there aspects of these artifacts that I can highlight that would normally get overlooked because we focus too much on the destination of them?
Remember the bridge.
Thank you for joining us today on The Storming Journey. You can support our work on this podcast by subscribing to our Patreon, leaving a review, or sharing the podcast with a friend. We hope you'll join us next week, and in the meantime, remember, journey before destination.